We begin at this hour with developments in Abuja, where the Supreme Court is insisting Nnamdi Kanu has a case to answer. The Apex Court faulted his extraordinary rendition by the federal government as due process was not followed in bringing him to the country. TVC News judiciary correspondent Celestina Ria has more.
It was not a good day for Nnamdi Kanu's family and friends, as they are hoped that the Supreme Court would align itself with the judgment of the Court of Appeal. The Supreme Court swayed in another direction to say, although due process of criminal law was not followed, the federal government was in violation of Kenya Extradition Act and Nigerian Extradition Act. It does not render the trial an illegality. Justice Emmanuel Algem, who read the lead judgment, held that the violation of Mr. Kanu's right ought to have been filed by way of civil procedure. The lower court remained in the realms of sentiments in the case. Justice Algem asks if law enforcement means to do anything to enforce the law. He answers in the negative, as it does not mean to commit a crime to enforce the law. He says the court cannot uphold the judgment of the Court of Appeal.
The Supreme Court is the Supreme Court. What the Supreme Court says represents the law. We respect it. We go by it. We had hoped that it would come our way, but it has gone the other way.
Came very heavy on the security agencies, where they have in any way, impaired on the rights, the fundamental rights of the defendant. However, our laws have made very clear provision for remedy. Where there's such infraction on the right of the defendant, then you can such a defendant can go to the civil court.
Mr. Kanu has been in detention since June 2021, when he was rearrested in Kenya after the federal government was alleged to have forcefully extradited him to Nigeria. He was arraigned before the Federal High Court in Abuja on a 4-count charge of treasonable felony, conspiracy to commit treasonable felony, terrorism, illegal importation of radio equipment.
Extract from the ruling of the Supreme Court today, Kanu as the father of the nation, issue a broadcast and then issue knowledge, discontinue the trial and grant him unconditional bail and commence the process for political and political solutions to the matter.
Although the Supreme Court sympathized with Mr. Kanu on how he was extraordinarily renditioned to Nigeria, the court says the law must remain the law. With this judgment, Mr. Kanu will have to go back to the Federal High Court, Abuja, and appear before Justice Binta Inyangu to answer to the remaining 7-count charges against him. Celestina Ria, TVC News, Abuja.
Celestina joins us now for more on this. Celestina, what was the mood in the court today?
About a day, it was a very sad day, I would say, for Mr. Kanu and also his family members. His brother was in court. They were not very happy because they were expecting to hear good news from the Supreme Court, and very soon, hopefully, they were expecting to see their brother home. But unfortunately, that was not the case today. As the court said, Mr. Kanu, we have to go back to the trial court and answer to the 7-count charges that is left out of the 15-count charge that was preferred against him by the federal government. So what this means is that with the position of the court today, no matter the violation of the rights of any citizen by the security agency in carrying out their duty in trying to get a suspect to court or a defendant in court, the proceedings or the trial before the court cannot be stopped. What this victim can do is to seek redress by filing a fundamental rights enforcement suit.
Right, Celestina.
We heard from the prosecuting counsel.
Tina, if you can hear me, now that the case will be taken back to the High Court for trial, does it seem they are prepared for it?
They have to go back to the drawing board and prepare their defense, because very soon the Federal High Court will resume fully in January, because they are going on holidays on the 18th of December. So Mr. Kanu and his counsel will need to sit down and prepare their defense, because they had hoped that the Supreme Court will give them justice by saying that the Court of Appeal was right in its judgment. But today the Supreme Court swayed a different direction. Justice Emmanuel Algem, who read the judgment, said that there is no law stopping the trial from going on, irrespective of the violation of rights conducted by a security agency in respect to the suspect. So what this means is that Mr. Kanu's lawyer will have to see him. Their hope was the fact that since 2021 he has been in detention. He ought to have been granted bail, which the Supreme Court said yes, he ought to have been granted bail. His earlier bail ought not to have been revoked because he had to flee for his life when his hometown and his house was invaded. So simply put, that Mr. Kanu and his lawyer will have to go to the drawing board to prepare their defense to appear before Justice Binta Nyako of the Federal High Court.
All right, then. Thank you very much for that update. Tell us an area for us in Abuja.